just get started. That's okay. We'll be just very quick demo of Quantum GIS or QGIS. It's free and open source geographical information system, and much easier to do maps using this than it is hacking up your own Python scripts, as I found probably a little bit too late. So just download it. Takes up a fair amount of space, maybe 100 meg or thereabouts. It can be quite tricky to get into though, if you've never used a GIS before. I don't use a GIS at work. This is just a kind of hobby, so I kind of had to learn it the hard way, reading the manual. It actually does have a very good PDF manual with screenshots, and this is what you do and this is how you get it, so it's worth plugging away. Not many free or open source things have such good manuals, to be honest. Basically, there is an OpenStreetMap set of tools that will allow you to import OSM files into your map, or you can download them from OpenStreetMap itself, or upload them. Basically, a geographical information system is a way of bringing in geographical information into a database and then plotting it. So behind this, there's a database. You don't need to worry about the database too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you install it. When you install Quantum GIS, you go to the plugins menu. It has a whole raft of plugins already installed, but not all of them are enabled, and OSM is one of the ones that isn't enabled. So if you go to Manage Plugins, it comes up with a great big long list. Now, Tim's obviously set this up already, but I'll show you the ones that I'm going to be demonstrating. Add delimited text layer, you want that checked. Now, that is for when you're bringing in comma-separated files. One of the things I tend to do is, if I'm spitting data out of a script, easiest way to do it is to get comma-separated files with latitude, longitude, and whatever other fields you're after. If you scroll further down, you'll see the whole number of different options here, and there we go, there's the OpenStreetMap plugin. Version 0.5, the fact it doesn't have a version number 1 or above.
That doesn't relate to the API, does it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I mean, the API.
I thought it was the actual plugin itself, but it could. Well,
no, I think it was. Yeah, I think it's just
it
the version.
It shouldn't really matter too much. So I'm just going to cancel that. But basically, unless you do that, at least the OpenStreetMap plugin, you'll be sitting there scratching your head wondering why it's not appearing in your menu. As I say, it's one of these things that it can be quite complicated to get your head around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a sample file that I've got on my USB stick here, because I don't know how fast this is. Now, over here, I'll just drag this out so you can see it. We've got a number of icons. That's add from a file, so that's if you've got a local OSM file or an XML file that you downloaded. That shows and hides this, which is the OpenStreetMap feature. We'll see that in a... Oh, I'll just close that just now and bring it back. That's the OSM feature. That basically shows us what the highlighted node or whatever it is. We can download data, we can upload data. I'm not going to do any uploading. Basically, in theory, it means you could use this instead of Jobsum for editing. Oops. Must admit, I've not tried those last two. Right, okay, let's add a file. So I'm going to bring in an OSM file. Now, prompts you, obviously, for the file name. That's the easy part. So, unfortunately, there's a different version of Windows to what I'm used to. So, get my excuses in early again. Here we go. So, OSM files, there we go. So here's some I downloaded from the API earlier. In this case, actually, I think I downloaded them from QGIS. I'm going to take the centre of Edinburgh, which is this one here. So these are all OSM files. So open that. Now, add columns for tags. We're bringing this into a database, and what it can do is it can lift a load of tags, the name value pairs associated with the data, and stick them in the database. Now, how much we bring in depends on how much space you've got, how fast you want it to be, and also what you're actually wanting to plot. If you're just after roads and railways, for example, highway and railway would be enough. If you're after areas of things like pubs and so on, you'd be wanting amenity. What I tend to do is just bring them all in, to be honest. Really just laziness, but I'll just do this with a keyboard, it's faster. Another thing I tend to turn off, because it may have been fixed in this version. This is a fairly new version. The last version I tried this with, if you used the custom renderer, you saved your project and you brought it back in, it wouldn't let you load your project back in because it didn't bother saving the file. It was a bit of a bug. So I just tend to turn that off. Great thing about QGIS is you can just render stuff any way you like. That's the whole point of it. Okay, so I'm going to bring that in. So you'll see what it's done on the left hand side there. It's brought in 3 layers. So it's brought in points, lines and polygons. Points obviously being nodes. Nodes that it's identified as being things like pubs, points of interest. Lines being parts of ways that are roads or railways, and polygons being closed areas such as parks, cemeteries, things like that. So it has a fairly good way of mapping them into these 3 categories. And we can hide layers, so let's get rid of the lines and points, and we've got the polygons. Now we need to zoom in a wee bit here. Centre of Edinburgh, so let's go to the parts of the new town. Let's bring back some of those. Bring back some of the points and lines. Okay, so what we can do is we can identify stuff by bringing up our information and pointing and clicking. So let's choose, as you can see, as I hover over things, it's telling me, there we go. So I've just hovered over that, and from local knowledge, I should be able to guess that. That's actually now an allotment. So you can see here, key value. So access private, leisure garden. So that's showing us the OSM information, and we've got our way reference number up the top, and PHUT is the user. So you can see who put things in. It's only showing the most recent edit. It doesn't show the history of edits at all, as far as I know. Now, one of the things you can do is obviously custom rendering. Now, first of all, I'll show you how to get it projected properly, because if you're familiar with Edinburgh, that might look a little bit squashed up to you, and that's because you're effectively seeing an equirectangular projection. So X and Y being more or less what you see on the screen, rather than being projected properly. This is the bit that took me yonks to find out, and I should have actually read the bloody manual. Right down here, exactly where you're likely to not see it, is this option here, CRS status. The all-important, this is how we project it. Now, you probably aware of the fact that it's Mercator is the projection used by OpenStreetMap. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select all my layers. So Shift and click in the good old-fashioned. Sorry. Shift and click, and if you're running on a slow machine, you can actually turn rendering off when you're doing things and then turn it back on. I would have been using that if I had been showing it on my laptop, but as this is a nice fast laptop, it should be okay. Very bottom right, CRS status, click that. Right, okay. Now this is interesting because there aren't any coordinate reference systems in the bottom, so I'm going to have to search for it. You'll see here a huge number of different projections. Not many of them you'll find much use. Eye-watering selection. Projected coordinate systems, because we're after a Mercator coordinate system. Now, I'm sure there's probably someone here that will correct me in my choice of ellipsoid and what have you. Don't know if you've come across this, but the Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It's slightly squished at the poles. And one of the things we need to do is, what I tend to use is WGS 84, which is that's the datum used by the GPS system, and simple Mercator projection. Might get away with WGS 84 World Mercator, but I'm going to stick to what I know. There's so many projections, you've actually got a search box there, so if you want to kind of Google your projection. So I'm just going to OK that. And
I think you'd lost the selection of the three things when you were
yes.
mousing across.
Thanks for that. Oh, I remember what I did, or didn't. It's this thing at the top. Enable on-the-fly projection. That's the thing that I kept forgetting about. Basically, if you don't tell it to use a projection, it will not use the projection. Now, what's happened here is, if you look at the scale, you see 5 millimeters, and you're going, oh my god, what on earth have I done? Panic, panic, panic. It's working all right, but for some reason, which I've not quite worked out, it kind of translates like half a degree to like half a millimeter or something like that. The map is still there, and the way to find it is to go over here, zoom to extent or zoom full, or you can right click on one of these layers here, zoom to layer extent, bingo, got it back, and you can now see 0 to 3 kilometers. What you were seeing was seeing it zoomed in. The coordinates were kept at, what is it, -3x 55.5y, but those were now being translated into millimeters and not degrees. So we were looking at something about this size in Princes Street Gardens, which is why the screen went blank. You wouldn't believe how many cups of coffee I had to get through to work that one out. So zoom in. So just hide the points. You should now see it looks. Oops. I now show just the lines and the polygons. You'll see it stretched out more vertically, and that's the Mercator projection. That's how people would expect it to look. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with the other projection. It's just that that's what people expect to see. Okay, so various things we can do with this. One of them is to, I'll just zoom to extents. Reason why that's happened is because the water of Leith is there on one of the other layers. That's what's stopping me from zooming right in. It's smart enough to know that if a path starts inside your bounding box, you get the whole path, hence the water of Leith showing outside these areas. Now what we can do is, let's say we want to highlight the buildings in this particular colour, or the gardens. So I'm going to right click on this and do properties. So this has thankfully improved a vast amount on the previous version. I don't know when this version came out, but the previous version had all this stuff in one window, and it was absolutely painful to use. Very powerful, painful to use. So if we go to, we can colorise things by add a single symbol, in which case everything's done the same way. Categorised or graduated. Now I'm going to choose categorised. And what that does is it gives me an option, column. So let's pick the columns. So you can see various key values that we can use. So let's have a think. Let's have a look at land use. So that's probably more useful for us. Right, so do land use. Nothing's happened. Well, what we need to do is go down to here to classify. And what that does is it runs through the database and sees what values do we have for the land use field. And there you can see we've got railway, commercial, residential, grass, brownfield, retail, etc. Now, let's say we just want to plot the retail sites. So what I'm going to do is, see if I can shift select these. No, I can't. I'm going to have to do this, do these one at a time. Bear with me for a couple of, actually I'll keep cemetery in, because I'll keep grass in as well. So I'll keep these 4 in. And what I'll do is I'll colour commercial stuff in, change that. So commercial stuff, let's make commercial cyan, so we can remember the, so C for cyan for commercial. I'm going here for memorability rather than aesthetics. No one in the right mind would use cyan on a map. It's one of these colours that kind of burrows into your eyeballs. Basically, if it's a colour that appears on a ZX spectrum, you probably want to leave it alone. Now, for some reason, these colours don't necessarily majorly appear in the list. So let's say grass is green, as you'd expect.
I hope my grass isn't that colour.
I just forgot to say OK on this one. Okay, and we'll say retail is grey and cemeteries are
Black.
black, yes. Black, I tell you. Yes, black. Now, I think if you wanted to kind of show off like Tim did with his fancy shrubbery icons and what have you, you can set up SVG shapes and use them for your fill patterns. There's no reason. I mean, you can see here we've got a couple of hatch styles. You can set up SVG symbols and use those instead. There's actually a huge number of built-in shapes you can use. So let's say that. Okay, bingo, we've got our map with something's coloured. So I'm going to zoom in, this time using the proper zoom in tool. So we've got commercial premises. I'm trying to work out.
That's St James's Centre.
Yep, that's St James's Centre. Those are the various offices down Dundas Street. Trying to work out what that one. Not convinced about that one. There.
Just click on it and see what it is.
That's well done.
We're learning.
Learn you
That's
fast, young Padawan.
boring to actually click on it and see what it is.
Yes, information. So point and click, find out what it is.
Just this version.
Yeah, so there.
Is that big RBS maybe?
Where that is
There's also a Standard Life down there.
Yeah.
no, it's not Tesco's. It's kind of I suppose there's shops there, but that's oh no, that's the way they have the yoga centre and the various other bits and bobs. I know where that is now. Oops. Oh yes, that's another thing. You can sometimes find yourself hovering over things that you didn't realise were there. Here you go. Just because you can't see it on a map doesn't mean it isn't selected. Well, as you kind of wander the mouse around, you'll start seeing various buildings and gardens appearing mysteriously that you weren't aware of. Now, what you can do, you can also have labels against things. So what I'm going to do here is properties, labels. Now, labels allow you to put, funnily enough, text Normally it's some kind of a field, something like a name, for example. So what we could do is use the name label, which will be the name of the street. We'll just use the standard. This will look absolutely appalling. It'll be nowhere near as good using the standard default settings as you would get with the other renderers, but you probably wouldn't be using this necessarily for, yes, told you so. It's not smart enough to wrap them round paths, unfortunately, but that's not really what you would be using this for anyway. It's more for labelling data points, for example. I can say that at least you can see which street's which. So I'm going to undo that. I can't undo. Let's try that again. Just get rid of the labels. What you can do is various rules where you only apply formatting to certain things. For example, we could apply the labels just to the polygons. What I'll do is I'll finish off quickly with a demonstration of a data set that I produced. I'm hoping that I can work out how to use this version of Windows, because it seems to change every time I look. Here we go. D drive. Let's save files. Here we go. So this is going to be quite a big CSV file.
Don't you import that into QGIS?
Yeah, I'm going to import it in a sec, but I'm just going to show you what the file looks like. So this is something I've scraped from the Flickr website using a Python script. Flickr generally send their data back as XML, just like OpenStreetMap, so it's fairly simple. If you know how to parse one, you can parse the other. So we've got, what, 5? Each of these represents a geotagged photo. We've got 5 fields: neighbourhood, which is kind of done by cluster analysis at the Flickr side of things. So all the Stockbridge ones will appear with the same number. Longitude, latitude, number of views that this photograph has had, and the user ID, which uniquely but anonymously identifies the user. Just in case you geotag some photos in Edinburgh and you're worried that I know who you are. I can find out who you are, but that's the data, basically. Not a lot of it. Yeah, I think this might be a cut down data set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this thing here, which was the add delimited text layers. So I'm going to click on that. So I'm going to choose my file. So bring that in. So it's down here. So text or CSV, open that. Now, for some reason it starts with space delimited. I'm going to choose comma sep. There you go. It's actually pretty smart. It's able to see, if you've got a header field, I would recommend you use a header field, because it's smart enough to see headers like long and lat, and it doesn't matter which way round you've got, as long as it can recognise it as long, lat, or something like that, it automatically sticks it in the X and Y fields. It's quite clever. Either that, or it's just picking the first 2 floating point fields. I don't know. Also, you can put it, if you've got a Wicket format, if you're using a database that supports Wicket.
Sorry, what's Wicket?
Wicket is, oh, I'm quite vague on that. It's a kind of format for storing and representing things like latitudes and longitudes in databases. I can't go into a huge amount of detail.
So that similar to someone was talking about the GeoHash. Was that similar to the GeoHash stuff, or
not quite? I've seen it being used when people are using geospatial extensions for a lot of databases, like MySQL, for example. They'll allow you to specify, but rather than passing in latitude and longitude as 2 separate field values, you can pass them in as a point. And you can specify a point data type using what's called a Wicket value, which is, I think it's usually something daft like It's some symbol with brackets and the two values separated by a comma. I can say I don't know that much about Wicket. That was my understanding of Wicket, but
It stands for well-known text, apparently.
well-known text. There you go. Do you have any?
That doesn't help me.
No.
It's like the kind of proto XML for representing points or polygons with it.
Right.
Like the sort of conventions for open square bracket, sequence of numbers, comma separated, close square bracket.
Right.
And it can include stuff like the projection you're using.
Right. So it's a kind of way of bundling
Yeah.
all the stuff you want in
Yeah,
one
into
bit
one
of
thing,
information,
one
rather than
string.
having to pass in half a dozen different fields.
So I didn't realise that's what you were talking about when you said Wicket. It's only when you said WKT.
Right. Okay. I've just called it.
Which is
I just said
what I
Wicket
called
because
it also.
that's how I think of it. It's just.
I don't know how to pronounce, so you might be right.
Okay. So bring that in. Now, this may or may not work. Now, if it doesn't work, it depends on the version. No, it worked first time. Hooray! That never used to work in the older versions. What you had to do is manually go into this layer and reassign it WSG84, because otherwise it would shrink all these points into like the size of a fag packet in the middle of your map. So there we go. Here's our map of all the Edinburgh geotag photos. So I'll zoom out. This will include the water of Leith, so we'll hopefully see. Yep, there we go. That's all of Edinburgh. You can see that cross shape up at the top left. That's Cramond Islands. That's one of the most photographed parts. Portobello on the right hand side. That cluster there. As you can see, it's a bit messy, and that's because we're using big circles. We don't want to use big circles. So this is our layer here. I always mark my important files with a triple X on the end. I also like to think if someone ever stole my laptop, they'd be in for a hell of a disappointment. It's like, oh, triple X. So here we go, style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the symbol to all sorts of different types. Of text or SVG shapes, but I'm just going to go for a simple marker. I'm just going to use a cross, because of course crosses take up much less space. There. So if I now zoom in, you can see a little bit more definition. There. Actually, it looks a wee bit like a galloping giraffe to me. So, other things you can do is you can colorise them differently if you want to. Let's do properties again. So let's colorise it by change the style. Oh yeah, here we go. Graduated this time. Now, what we could do is we can lift out the neighbourhood column. So that's the cluster analysis that was done by Flickr. Now clicked on classify. Oh, that's not much use. We want individual symbols categorised. Right, let's try that again. Depends whether you're after discrete or continuous. So discrete being a single set. Oh, that's what I really want to do is select random colours, to be honest. No. Okay, I'll try something different. I'll do number of views. So let's do a new colour ramp. So what I want to do is colorise it so that the number of views starts with black for the least viewed, so something that no one's actually bothered to look at. Starts with black, and I'll use red for a hot photo, so that's one that more than one person's looked at. Okay. That, let's classify. And what? Embarrassing. I've forgotten how to do this.
I think you probably want to graduate it if it's number of views, because it's
Yes, thanks. That's nope. Ah, yes, here we go. So mode, various possibilities, equal intervals of default. What I'll do is I'll use quantile. Quantile is where you say about the top 20% one colour and the next 20% another colour, etc. I've got 5 classes here. You could do any number of quantiles if you want, although if it's not 5, they're not they're quintiles, not quantiles. Quantiles is fourths, isn't it?
That's quartiles.
That's
Quantiles is
quartiles.
for any.
Yeah.
Right, thanks. So classify that and goes away and thinks. Right, okay. To be in the top 20%, you only need 28 views, which is quite interesting.
So something about flicker flashes.
Yes, well, I mean, I actually did some statistics with hundreds of thousands of photos, and it's a standard long tail type distribution. You know, there's a few people with hundreds of thousands of views, and I think the average, which is a bit an average is a bit misleading on that kind of distribution, but the average was something like what was it? It was 27, but the median is 6. Median views on Flickr is 6. So all these people worried about, you know, how to get more views are kind of missing the point, really, worrying themselves about nothing. Okay, so there. So that's colorized it by the number of views.
But it's gone back to circles.
So back to circles. Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of these things that there's so many things that you need to change at the same time, and it's easy to forget.
Actually, circles are probably better actually than
Yes, yes. To
coloured
be honest,
dots.
it's
Coloured crosses rather.
I mean, I brought all sorts of stuff into this. I got my hands on My Society for a while were doing downloads, offering kind of free downloads, process downloads of the Ordnance Survey open database. Now, it's easy enough to get your hands on the Ordnance Survey's open data. Unfortunately, they've got the wonderful thing where they're using northings and eastings. And if you've ever tried to work out how to map northings and eastings to latitude and longitude, it's not one of the simpler bits of mathematics. It's certainly beyond my
it
small
shouldn't matter too
brain.
much, because quantum will deal with the multiple projection systems at once. So I think as long as you
It
tell
should do, yeah, as long as you know what the
it is,
which projection to use.
Oh,
If you're not using a GIS, then it
Yeah, if
becomes
you're
very
doing-
hairy. I'm not sure. Do you know what name the projection would be for that?
OSGB.
So
Yeah.
SGB, I think
OSGB, right.
It's
the
national, right?
number's 27700, I think.
I think that's right. Yes.
Approximately.
But you're not admitting to.
So that's useful to know. Thanks. That would make some things a lot easier. And finally, I'll quickly show. I think Tim was saying that he's actually got the entire. So just scratch that. Of course, you can hook this into grass, which is another. It actually comes with grass. I used grass a few years back, and I've completely forgotten how to use it. It's very, very, very powerful. Wonderful geospatial stuff, and I have completely forgotten that those particular brain cells have obviously been brutally killed off in the meantime.
By grass.
Well, I think you need to have quite a lot of grass to just mellow enough just to kind of understand it.
What does grass do?
Grass lets you do lots of interesting kind of geospatial, like the kind of heat mapping stuff.
Okay,
it's
so that's
doing
what
like
you
that.
use for heat
If you want to
mapping,
do, I mean,
Analysis.
QGIS lets you do plotting, but it doesn't let you do some of the hardcore analysis that you could do with grass. I've yet to work out how to get it working with grass, to be honest.
Isn't grass mainly command line anyway?
Grass is more or less command line. Yeah, that's I think probably why.
Yeah, it's not a GUI interface. It's not an easy interface.
Yeah, it does come with a GUI, but it's a pretty thin wrapper from what I remember on as you said, basically a command line. I'm hardcore, but I'm not that hardcore. Okay, so was it the C drive or?
It's desktop.
Desktop.
Yeah.
So just add. So you can do. What I've personally found is. Let me get the desktop on this.
Left-hand slider, just slide up to the top. And
Right. This is what I've always found tricky about.
Yeah, there's Scotland.
There we go. What I've certainly found with no, thank you.
Wait, a while?
It shouldn't take too long actually, it's not. It depends what you're bringing in. What I was going to say is that certainly when I have a 4 gig fairly powerful PC at home, and it was quite happily choose through Scotland OSM in a GIS quite happily. I'm not quite sure whether this is going to see what you like, but I've found that sometimes the code I write is actually faster than the pre-packaged stuff. 2%.
700 megs, you
Yeah,
define?
I think it's struggling a
I
little bit.
think yes.
It will.
It will do. Oh yeah. I mean, I was expecting it to be a bit faster than that.
So how did you generate that OSM file? Just did it export?
That was
GeoFabric extract.
GeoFabric.
Ah, okay.
What you find, I don't know if you remember, but I'd had about 8 or 9 different files covering Edinburgh.
Mhm.
If you're doing it from, I'll just cancel that because it's not going to happen. If you're downloading from the normal OSM, using the normal OSM API, you're pretty limited into the area you can cover, and it also depends on the city. For example, you take a really dense area like Paris, it's going to be a very, very small area, like a kilometre squared, you can download in one go because it's 50,000 notes or thereabouts. Edinburgh, you can get about 8 or 9 slightly overlapping downloads will cover Edinburgh quite happily, but that can take quite a while to bring that into QGIS. So you're better off if you're really plotting anything larger than a small part of a city, is probably to download the, not plan it, but download something like Scotland OSM or England OSM, and just bite the bullet and do the whole lot. I found my machine was struggling with England OSM, definitely.
The other thing to do is it's quite easy to cut bits out. So if you download Scotland.osm and download the .bz file is like 40 meg, so actually it compresses because it's XML. It compresses really well because there's lots of square brackets. There's lots of stuff in there that doesn't tell you anything. So it compresses really well. You can then use Osmosis has a command line where you say I'm just interested in this bounding box, and it'll just cut down to that area that you want, and it's a really quick way of
That's what I've done.
Of getting a smaller area. If you don't, so if you just want Edinburgh, you can download the whole of Scotland, cut out Edinburgh, and then you can.
Actually, I saw there's an alternative API. I didn't get very far with
the
it.
X API. It's kind of up. It's kind of up and down. I would say.
This is what I wondered about it. It didn't seem to be a very, as you say, it's up and down. It didn't seem to be particularly reliable in terms of availability. But in theory, Zappy should allow you to download, a bounding box much larger than you can download through the normal API. Using URLs where you kind of tell it.
There's a reason it's having performance trouble because it lets you download a bounding box as big as you want. So
yeah, that's probably why.
Depends on the big job.
Exactly.
I'm not sure what they're running it against and how scalable it is. I think you need to be careful when you're letting people do unlimited downloads, as you say. Okay.